welcome to OK Computer. I'm Dan Nathan. I am joined again by Ann Bordetsky. She's a partner at NEA. Ann, welcome back to the pod.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for having me back. Always love being here.
Well, listen, I really enjoy the convo because of where you sit right now in the, I would just call it the Gen AI ecosystem, some of the investments that you've been making over the last couple years. You and I started talking about them, I want to say, early 2023. You brought on Arvind Srinivas, the CEO, co-founder of Perplexity, I think a couple months ago, and I've seen him all over. He's doing a great job, and really, I think he's doing a great job not only talking about the company that he's building and the products that he's shipping, but becoming a voice on what is a very nascent, I think we would both agree, sector. And he's doing it with the help of you and a whole host of others, and I think the narrative is really good. I'm just curious, real quickly, thoughts on that, because for you, I think you guys led his Series A in early 2023. Back then, no one knew who they were. No one knew what the product they were going to ship. And now it seems like everybody who's focused on this space knows the product and uses it.
Yeah, look, I think Arvind's getting a lot of attention and the company is getting a lot of attention and interest because they're on a mission to make AI useful for consumers, right? It's not research in a lab. It's taking the best in class models that are coming to market, it seems like almost every single week, and trying to figure out how to take that and turn it into an incredible, useful experience that will be relevant for millions of people around the world. I think that a lot of people are drawn to that, not the theory of AI, not the scary sort of dystopian view of AI, but like, what can AI help me do today? And I think that is the number one reason that Perplexity is resonating, continuing to grow organically as a company, continuing to grow globally now. It is truly a useful knowledge assistant, and we can see how that might play out over time. But look, I mean, people are busy and they want useful AI. And I think that is one of the best frontiers for builders right now.
Yeah, well, as we're recording this right now, it's Tuesday afternoon. Google is hosting their I/O Summit conference, whatever you want to call it, introducing a whole host of products. We're going to talk about that. Also, OpenAI yesterday got in front of the Google stuff. So we're going to hit some of the things that they released and again, how some of that stuff is being perceived. It seems like that almost everything that they put out is an immediate hit. We're also going to talk about some other use cases, some stuff in the hardware space. And we're going to talk about that Apple flattening ad and the controversy over there, because I think you have some stuff to say on that. All right, and let's first break down a little bit of what you heard from OpenAI. I think a lot of this stuff was sort of previewed. We're thinking about multimodal sort of models at the moment. It seems like voice is the rage here. What were your takeaways from what OpenAI, I think it's the GPT-4o, and it's not 40, it's 4o as the letter here. And this is, a voice. I mean, again, what I perceived is that people were like, okay, this was what Siri promised us 10 years ago, and finally OpenAI is doing it.
Yeah, I mean, the last 24 hours, and we're still digesting this with all the Google announcements today, are an absolute fire hose of new launches from both OpenAI and Google, and the interplay between the two is fascinating to watch. But just going back, 12 hours ago when we were responding to OpenAI's news, look, I'm very impressed with OpenAI for two reasons. One is they're continuing to deliver on their promise of building foundation models that are not only going to deliver more capabilities to the entire ecosystem, and we saw that with the multimodal launch yesterday, the ability to understand, voice and text and images, and to create instantaneous sort of translation between all of these modalities, right? Voice to speech and understanding what's in an image, being able to essentially have AIs talk to each other, but also delivering on better sort of cost and performance for their latest model. It's 50% cheaper than GPT-4 Turbo. That's going to be important for a lot of startups that are building on top of OpenAI's models, and where these cost reductions really make a difference in terms of building scalable experiences for consumers and businesses. But I have to say, I was very impressed yesterday with OpenAI for two reasons. One is they clearly tried to steal Google's thunder, and I think they did a phenomenal job. But two, I think they really brought a lot of humanity back into the conversation in and around what AI can do for us. Now, clearly, they have to find a way to continue to engage and bring back users to ChatGPT. And we know they've, potentially have been struggling with that recently. So I think the voice assistant is a way that they can give their users and consumers a reason to interact with ChatGPT more. But the way that they did it, I thought was really clever. It's a lot of humanity that we're putting back into the conversation. It's showing people and inspiring the entire ecosystem, I think consumers more broadly, about how AI can play a role in your life. So in some ways, the voice assistant is the holy grail. But yesterday we saw, a voice assistant be a teacher, and you can see how it could be incredibly useful to have an AI tutor that can review your homework and coach you along the way. We saw their voice assistant be used as a social game, right? Social game between friends. We saw the voice assistant laugh at someone's dad jokes, right? And
Never
express
happened
emotion.
before, basically.
Never happened
Yeah,
before.
yeah,
Like, we're definitely
yeah,
going to need AIs to do that.
yeah.
Um, but also bring more sort of human expression into the communication. And so I think that they really are mirroring back for us the fact that we want AI to feel human. We want it to feel natural. We want it to feel intuitive, especially when we're using it in our personal lives. And they showed a lot of that yesterday. And I think really leaned into the consumer experience versus just talking about the latest models and its performance and its utility for developers. So great move for them. And, part of me in the back of my head is also thinking about the strategic plays that they're making. And so perhaps this was a way of demonstrating to Apple that they really do have the ability to power Siri or power other core iOS functionality. As rumor has it, they might be considering a partnership.
Well, it's interesting. That was exactly my take last night on CNBC's Fast Money when I was kind of reviewing some of what I heard from the company, and they demonstrated its functionality is like, this is almost, in 2 days, a little bake-off for, Gemini versus, call it OpenAI, which is kind of interesting because everyone's focused on this June 10th Worldwide Developers Forum in Cupertino. And again, I have to assume that, Apple is on the 1-inch line of, licensing this technology, but they have to go a bit further than, let's say, Microsoft did, because when I looked at a lot of the announcements from OpenAI, I see them really competitive with what Microsoft wants to use this technology for. The idea that they're going to create a search engine, there's a whole host of things that they've come out with where we're like, oh, wait, isn't that what Microsoft was hoping to build out, capabilities with this technology? And I think what's different about maybe Apple is that their investment in machine learning and cloud-based and their own chip making capabilities and the like has really set the stage where I guess they never had to build these foundational models, right? If you really think about it, because that's what a lot of the bulls on Apple, the stock and the company, are saying, and therefore maybe just a kind of a layer, a licensing sort of thing, gives them the ability to kind of integrate it into their existing technology and then deploy it across an installed base of 2 billion iOS users over the world. Thoughts on that? Again, I'm sure you don't spend a lot of time thinking about Apple other than all the products that you use from them. In the public markets, we spend a lot of time talking about it because, again, it's the second largest market cap company in the world next to Microsoft.
Yeah, I'd never thought I'd find myself saying this, but I think Apple needs a growth story. I'm obviously a very happy user of Apple's products. It's an incredible company. They have all the resources and all the cash in the world to figure this out, but they are on the back foot right now, and they should be worried because the sort of core of this next wave, it is the machine intelligence, it is the foundation models combined with the ability to really interact with user data, and they seem to be out in the cold. Siri does not have these capabilities. It makes sense that they would be looking at both OpenAI and Gemini. It'll be interesting to see who they pick, but it's fascinating that Apple should be on the back foot, and yet I think they might be one of the biggest beneficiaries of the bake-off that's happening between Google and OpenAI. The interesting thing about Siri and, if and when they sort of launch a better version of Siri powered by generative AI, and we'll see who the partner is for that, is what happens to consumer data in that scenario. That's something I'm very interested to see and watch, in that sort of partnership. typically Apple has been, the gateway for collecting consumer data, consumer information that should give it a position of strength. But, when that assistant is powered by a third party, whether it's Google or OpenAI or somebody else, who ultimately collects and take advantage of that user data will be very, very telling. And I think I'm really excited to see how that kind of plays out in the industry. Then there's obviously Meta, who we're not talking about today, but they're also well positioned to build an AI assistant, and they've made announcements that they're working on that. But yeah, it does feel like a big bake off coming into the World Wide Developer Day that Apple is hosting in early June.
Yeah, it's interesting, just from like looking at it competitively, I would think that OpenAI would be much less competitive than, let's say, licensing Gemini. But again, Apple and Alphabet or Google have had this long relationship on search, and it seems to, they haven't really overlapped a whole heck of an amount, despite the fact that obviously, Google owns Android, which owns a good deal of smartphone market share around the world. And it just seems like that if OpenAI is open for business to license that technology, it puts a lot of these different players on a similar sort of playing field rather than having some of those competitive sort of issues. So to me, that's kind of my 2 cents there.
Apple at some point has to start to diversify away from Google, right? They've had a long-standing relationship with Google. They, earn billions of dollars every single year by using Google search. But if I were Apple, I would worry about that dependency over time. And I would take this moment to begin to diversify and really create some optionality to their Google relationship. And what a better way to do that than to begin to bring in OpenAI, Perplexity, and other, AI challengers, right, into their ecosystem. And I think that's what we're all watching to see is, do they take this moment to start partnering more broadly across the ecosystem versus continuing to build in a dependency on just Google?
Well, yeah, and they haven't done a great job of partnering over the years. And when you think about the relationship with Google, it's literally them paying for, search, exclusive search on Safari on iOS devices, which is a very high margin, 20 or so billion that just drops right into, right down to the bottom line if you think about it for Apple. And when you think about the smartphone business, this is not a high gross margin business, right? So as upgrade cycles have get elongated, your point about they need a new growth cycle, I just don't believe that there's an opportunity for them to grow because they say the next iPhone is called AI. It's going to be in the service sector where they get all of their margin for the most part, right? And so your point is like, how does, and people forget, so WWDC is a developers forum. So the idea is you get all the developers there, you show them what your new operating system looks like, you show them how it works with your hardware, you show them how it works within the ecosystem and spatial computing and wearables, and the list goes on. And then you say, okay, go develop, create the best things for our users. And then, you know what? We're going to take a 30% tax on every, app that is downloaded or paid for or service that are used for. I mean, that's how you get the growth going there, right? And so to me, I'm really looking forward to see what they come out with. They have basically been, at least signaling a great deal more than they ever do in front of events. They just held this iPad event. They spent a lot of time talking about it. All right, before we get too bogged down on Apple, which I think we already have, let's talk about the controversy around this ad last week that came out with this iPad event, because I saw you tweeting about it, and you were actually one of the only people I saw tweet something really, really interesting about it. And I just want to quickly mention that, Ben Thompson, who writes Stratechery, I know you read him, most people who listen to this pod read him. He made a really good point about this. I think he was in agreement that the ad was, really off the mark when you think about what are the reasons that people are drawn to, the Apple ecosystem. But he also made the really good point is that one of the reasons why I guess it's so controversial, because it's so true, right? When you think about what these devices, and it's not just Apple, they're just the ones that I guess tone deafly said it. So I'd love to get your take, what your initial impression was, what your impression has been reading a lot of people or talking to a lot of people that have their finger on the pulse in this space as you do, and then talk to me a little bit about a little sleuthing that you did, because it's funny. This is not the first time someone's tried to make this sort of argument about technology.
Yeah, that ad, it really hits you in the heart. There's something about it, and I'm definitely not the only one. I think a lot of people had a similar reaction of, it does perfectly encapsulate um, this idea of kind of crushing the creative industry, right? And trying to cram it down into a single iPad, which kind of makes sense for Apple, but it was kind of the most dystopian ad I've ever seen from them, which is both I think emblematic of like, yeah, we are trying to cram the entire creative industry, right, onto some application on the iPad. But the way that they did it just felt really dystopian. Like, we're going to take all these amazing artifacts and, devices that we've loved and that have played a role in our lives in the past. We're going to crush them and make them go away. And it just felt like a real departure from the type of advertising that we typically have seen from Apple in the past, which is deeply empowering, like empowering to users, empowering to creatives. It's inspiring, it's playful, and it's fun. And this felt like, okay, we're just crushing the creative industry and we know it. And so I think it really didn't resonate because it's not the type of Apple that we really expect to see. And there was a version of this ad that was done, I think, years ago. I forget, the year in which it came out, maybe like 20 or
2008.
30 years ago. 2000, okay, a little more recent, 2008. That was basically the same thing by an Apple competitor, also a device maker, that kind of played on the same theme. But, we just expect better from Apple.
Well, it's interesting. I got two things to say about that. Okay, so the 2008 LG ad, think about where we were in mobile computing. Like, to me, that ad felt actually very optimistic in a way. It was basically introducing the fact that this is all the things that you can do in this handheld device. And think about what percentage of mobile phone users had smartphones at the time. So it was basically saying, hey, come take a crack at this. We got an 8 megapixel camera on this thing. We have a flat touch screen, like all these sorts of things. So to me, it's just interesting how far we've come since then, how iterative some of these, actual hardware devices are. And it's basically telling us that software, in my opinion, is leading the way. But I also want to mention, it's interesting that you use the term dystopian. 1984 Macintosh commercial, very dystopian, right? When you think about it, meant to be very optimistic, but it had a very specific tone to it at the time. So in some ways, they're almost going back to their Macintosh roots from 40 years ago. And I had a much less negative, feeling about this ad. And I'll tell you why. I think a lot of the people who are likely to complain on their blogs or on Twitter or, on their podcast are people that deem themselves to be or see themselves to be as very creative, right? But if you think about the masses, they'd love to be as creative as us or you or whoever, right? And this sort of $1,000 device levels the playing field for them. They can make digital music. They can do, create digital art or experiment with an AI model in a way that maybe, they're just not equipped to do on their own to figure this stuff out. So to me, I actually have a very different take on it. I loved the ad and I thought it was amazing. And I think we're going to look back and be like, what a bunch of whiny, what on Twitter as usual, and it's usually coming from Silicon Valley or the like. And again, this is me putting my Wall Street hat on, so there's my little rant. But again, I just think it's so funny.
Well, look, the question is, who is providing the inspiration today? Because I agree with you. Everyone wants to be creative. Democratize creative tooling is one of the biggest opportunities that we have with generative AI. But that inspiration today, it is not coming from Apple. It's coming from startups and, it's coming from OpenAI and Google too. But look at what we've seen in the last couple of weeks with Suno, Udio, and these other startups that are doing synthetic music generation, right? The idea that anyone can now compose a song, create a song, share it with a friend, like that is going to unleash so much creativity, music generation, video generation, right? The ability to create images with generative AI, like that, I think really speaks to what will excite consumers and also the potential that we have to democratize creative tooling and make it accessible for everyone. That's not in the iPad moment today. I think that the interesting thing with Apple is what is that next S curve? It's not going to be the iPad. We already have the iPad. I think the unanswered question that Apple has to speak to is what does that next device look like that will feel magical and new and relevant for this future of both generative AI and AI assistants. We have not seen that from
Well,
them yet.
interestingly, they have released that product that I think they're betting the next 10 years on, and that's the Vision Pro, right? So to them, spatial computing is that thing. And let's also remember at the time, when they introduced the iPhone in 2007, I mean, Nokia and BlackBerry were behemoths. Motorola still had that cool Razr phone, right? And it was the adoption of that was really slow. And I'm not making a bull case for Vision Pro, but if spatial computing is going to be a thing, I have to suspect that Apple is going to be at the forefront of it. Also, when you think about this AirPods business that they've created, it's a larger revenue business than I think 90% of the S&P 500's, revenues in a way. And so to me, what basically the killer app is for Apple is that ecosystem, the likelihood that they lose meaningful market share to another hardware company because they're using some other, to me, you know what I mean? Like some other app-based sort of thing. If it's not an operating system, I don't think that's going to be the case. And think about this, Facebook tried to do it over the years. There's, a whole host of others. I mean, Android, while they have tremendous market share around the world, the average selling price of the devices that they're on it's less than half of what Apple's are. And Apple has 80% of the gross margin in smartphones, all over the world. So to me, it's not an easy one. If anything, I think Microsoft and the perception about what they've been able to do in the last year and a half with OpenAI's tech, I think that's the thing that ultimately could disappoint, in my opinion. If we're just kind of playing stock market, if you will, a little bit here. But again, you and I, we're gonna debate this, I think, for years to come here. Anything out of Google, and I know that it's still going on right now as we're recording, that made you a bit optimistic relative to expectations, relative to some of the other launches that they've had over the last year and a half or so? Because again, they've been this perceived laggard. It was initially that Bard launch, I think in early 2023. You and I talked about it at the time. Then they renamed it and it's Gemini Advanced or Pro or this and that, whatever, pretty uninspired name here. But again, these are free products that they're introducing across. They have 7 or 8 platforms, or whatever you want to call them, that have over 1 billion users, 3 or 4 with 2 billion users. I mean, if you can enhance that productivity and make those products that much better, you make that ecosystem, that much stickier, I guess.
Well, when it comes to Google, I think today we're seeing them make the obvious move that makes so much sense for Google, which is embed their AI capabilities, task agents, the ability to summarize, et cetera, directly into the products where they have a massive install base. Even, I'm a huge Google user myself, obviously love Gmail. They finally are starting to talk about embedding AI in Gmail. In some ways, these are sort of banal AI efficiencies, but these are the things we're going to use every single day that makes sense to us as utilities. Hey, yeah, summarize all the emails from my kid's school. And by the way, give me a summary and then write a reply for me. This is the stuff that consumers are going to use every single day. And it makes sense for Google to essentially abstract AI into a set of tasks and assistants and automations within their existing products. And I'm actually very optimistic that that will generate a lot of growth for them, as it should. I'm a little more skeptical about, Google really sort of, creating entirely new products with these capabilities. And I think the theme of what we're seeing today is just making sure that they're distributing their AI capabilities across all of their best properties, search, Gmail, and Workspace.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to Perplexity really quickly here. It was an announcement last week. I saw you tweeting about it. I read the press release. It sounded really interesting to me. And again, I think the theme in generative AI over the last week has been voice. And I think we're going to hear a lot more about it as we get to WWDC in June 10th. And Siri has to be a focal point of this strategy if you think about it. But the headline here was SoundHound AI and Perplexity partner to bring online LLMs to next next-gen voice assistants across cars and IoT devices. Now, IoT was hot a few years ago. I'm sure there were some investments that you were making, in and around that ecosystem. Is supposed to be the next big thing or so. That is the Internet of Things. Talk to me about this announcement and what your takeaway was, and really breaking it out. I guess juxtapose some of the things that you've heard from OpenAI and Google over the last 24 hours.
Yeah, I mean, Perplexity is moving fast, experimenting with a lot of different product features and partnerships. This is the latest example. I think, the future that we're moving toward is that we want intelligent conversational AI assistant to be available to us, in any setting. In any context. And I think the SoundHound partnership is an interesting way to sort of introduce that into the in-car experience. You're driving, you definitely shouldn't be on your phone. It's incredibly dangerous. If you have a question or, you want to have a conversation, you can do that with the Perplexity and SoundHound APIs and AI assistants. I think the bigger picture here, though, is that we have a lot of work to do. And I think this is part of the opportunity for Perplexity to, again, like make all of these new hardware devices in and around AI and AI assistants truly useful. And the killer use case time and time again is information search, right? You want a recipe, you want, a list of the top restaurants, you want an answer to some very specific question. Perplexity can give that to you in a really succinct way. And so I'm really excited about the company continuing to embed Perplexity search and Perplexity's AI assistant essentially into all of the different consumer touch points that exist. And I think we'll see more experimentation from them on that front. I think, I'm slightly less bullish on the Vision Pro, not to go back to Apple, but I'm not sure the future is all of us walking around with a giant headset on our faces. I'm much more excited about something affordable, lightweight, earbuds, maybe with wearable glasses, some combination that is so affordable and so easy to use that, it's available to a billion people, not someone who can pay $5,000 for a Vision Pro.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100%, especially for a consumer application. I think that's probably first adopted in the enterprise, especially at that sort of price point. And I could see a whole host of use cases for it. And you're already starting to see some developed, for training modules. And I mean, the list goes kind of on and on. I think as a consumer device, I agree with you. There was a story out earlier in the week. Meta explores AI-assisted earphones with cameras. That is coming from the information. We'll throw that in the show notes. And again, I go back to Google Glass from at least 10 years ago. I mean, for all intents and purposes, that was laughed off the tech scene. But that is the sort of device that looks somewhat unobtrusive, had a little camera on it, could probably do a whole host of things that, you know what I mean? Like that right now, like think about what you could jam on something, that size. It's more of an augmented reality sort of glass, but that might have been an easier step. But you just have to think about how Apple operates in general. Like to me, the Apple Watch, it would have made much more sense to look like a Whoop or something that was really healthcare focused at a much lower price point, get much like mass adoption, make it a very easy companion to your iPhone rather than introducing a $500-600 device now as high as like $1,000, with the Ultra. So when you think about some of the other things, there's been this humane pill, this pin, this rabbit. I think that you were doing a unboxing. I haven't seen an unboxing this decade, Ann. So good on you for doing that with the rabbit. And then when you read stuff about Meta, Oculus has not been a home run for them. I know that that's a big part of their metaverse strategy and what they want to do with generative AI. How are you thinking about wearables in the space? And are you looking at investments in the space as it relates to AI-powered devices?
Hardware's hard. Most investors know that. But look, I think I try to approach everything as, from an optimistic mindset. I think it's easy to be cynical and say these things can never work until they do. And so I think that I'm very open to experimenting with different consumer hardware. I try to buy and try anything new that comes to market. There are exceptional teams trying to build, wearable glasses. The Rabbit is a really awesome play on like a retro device. We've tried the Humane Pin as well. I mean, it's a stellar team. And so I think all of these early attempts matter because putting these new AI wearables and these new hardware formats into the hands of consumers is how we're going to understand like what's truly useful, what's viable, and I don't think we've seen it yet. So, I think as an investor, I'm very sort of cautious about consumer hardware. I think consumer hardware really needs a killer use case, and we really haven't seen that outside of something like Perplexity Search or ChatGPT's AI assistant. So, I think that the ultimate form factor that could win here, I could be wrong, I'll be looking back a decade from now and say, like, I really didn't see it coming, but I think it will be something simple and intuitive, and that can also be a fashion statement, like, no one wants boring tech to put on their body, and so I think eventually we'll move toward a world of, maybe it'll be earbuds and glasses, maybe it'll be a pendant that you wear, but it'll be something where the technology and the fashion statement or the identity statement are kind of fused together in an interesting new way. And so we're proud to wear these devices. They're a statement of who we are and how we express ourselves. And yeah, they'll also be carrying around a really useful AI assistant.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask you this: is this a useful AI assistant, Grok? I'm not really. I don't use. I don't. Well, no, I don't hear anybody talking about it. But like, I don't use Twitter much anymore. I retweet stuff. I don't use it as like an RSS feed the way I used to. I don't really chat with people. I don't DM anymore. I feel like Elon's reading them. When I think about this, and by the way, I was given a premium service. I didn't want it. I didn't want the blue check. I took the blue check off. It somehow a week or two later popped on there. But then when I go there, I see that they're doing, like there's some Gen AI summaries of content and stuff. And I don't trust it, to be honest with you. So that goes back to trust is really important. And it's funny, like, the way that Elon Musk is playing in this space, it seems like he's like a lover scorned or something like that, like as we think about his relationship with OpenAI and the way and the speed in which he's focused on creating AI and using Twitter to do it, it just, to me, I don't trust it, but I'm just curious, what are people saying about it? You're still using Twitter. I'm sure a lot of your colleagues and friends are using it. I think engagement's down dramatically. I know I just go on and I look and see, my feed every once in a while, a couple times a week. I'm just curious what people are saying about the product of this, because it seems to be left out of a lot of these discussions of some of these Gen AI capabilities as it relates to, summarizing content and giving us answers.
I don't have much to say, and perhaps that's telling because I don't use Grok and I don't hear anyone talking about it. And, I think data quality is a really important consideration in training LLMs and ultimately the output. And, I think an open question for me is sort of what kind of data it was trained on and would I trust? Its ability to synthesize information on my behalf. I love Twitter. I'm still on there. It's mostly for the cooler conversation that you and I are part of in the tech community and then the startup community. But, it isn't sort of, the trusted source of information. And so I think, I don't know where Grok is going to go. I'm sure they have a talented team, but I don't think it's breaking through as either, a model or a consumer product at this point.
All right. Well, where I think Perplexity should go. I said this to you I said it on CNBC's Fast Money 2 months ago. I thought Apple, when they were like not talking about Gen AI at all, I thought that they should make, a $2 billion bid and acqui-hire, if you will. And then by the time you and I and Arvind had our conversation, it was a $3 billion bid that Apple should make. And now it feels like something 4 to 5. But again, it's a rounding number for Apple, if you think about it, or a rounding error, if you will. But, it just seems like that product on an installed base like that would catch on like wildfire, and it could quickly become a verb. We might need to change the name of it for become a verb, but
We need to shorten it a bit.
yeah, no, but again, congrats to, like everything that's going on there. And I only say that from like a product user, you know what I mean? Because I just see it getting better. I started listening to Discover Daily, which is their daily pod, which feels like really efficient. It's just easy at 5 minutes or so, and it's uniform, and I know what to expect, and I'm hearing some new stuff and some of the other advancements I'm seeing. So congrats to the team. Congrats for you. I know that you and your team are helping them along too. But Ann Bordetsky, I really appreciate you coming back. I love the conversation. I hope we can do it again soon.
Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on, Dan.